I wanted to start off by talking about my background and kind of the work that I've done in the past. A lot of the work that I did in the past started when I was 13 years old. So when I was 13, my mom, she fell really ill with pneumonia, and it's because doctors, they just couldn't give her the right medication the first time. And so that got me really interested into seeing how we could give people the right medication the first time. It was this whole concept called personalized medicine. How many of you here know about genetics? Just raise your hand. Okay, so we all know about genetics. We know it's why I look handsome, and some of you here don't. Funny joke, but anyways, we know that genetics is interesting because we can use it to personalize medications to specific people. I got really interested in this, and I met with the person that you see on the left-hand side or the right-hand side. He's Ruslan Dorfman. He started a company called PillCheck, and eventually, as I continued to work within personalized medicine, I got interested in this whole concept of gene sequencing. And the reason why gene sequencing was interesting was because you could look at someone's genetic information and understand it really quickly. And so what I did was I worked on simulating a method to understand how you could sequence DNA really fast using nanopores, and specifically nanotech. So in the image you see in the middle right there, you see that there's a hole inside of a sheet. And essentially what was happening was there was a DNA molecule that would pass through the hole, and you have an electric field. And so based on the current that each of the letters in the DNA give off, you know this is an A, this is a C, this is a T, this is a G, and so therefore you're able to get someone's entire genetic makeup literally just by passing a DNA molecule through a hole. And then when I turned 15, I was like, I kind of want to take this a step further. Rather than just taking in genetic information, I wanted to see if I could take in other things, like metabolomics, which is the food that you eat, and proteomics, which is proteins that are around you. And I wanted to see if I could create an AI model that could understand all these things and then see if you could prevent lung cancer before it occurred. And that's actually where I met Bruce, which is how I got introduced to this conference. I spoke at a TED Talk, and I ended up talking about this idea, and I worked at UHN, which is University Health Network, one of the world's top 5 hospital networks, and I interned there to understand, how do hospitals actually work? Why are these types of systems not being implemented? And when I turned sweet 16, coronavirus came around, and I kind of was locked at home. And so I realized that rather than working on a bunch of health projects, I actually wanted to get really interested into the space of entrepreneurship. I wanted to, just start a bunch of businesses. And one of the most interesting ones I started was in pregnancy. It sounds really weird, but I worked on a pregnancy subscription box for mothers during COVID because they had symptoms that they didn't know the products to get for. And so I was really interested in how I could create this box, monetize it, and actually send it out to a bunch of people. Now, I'm 17 years old, and I'm working on 2 main projects. The first is in regards to open defecation. So for those that don't know, there's 4.5 billion people around the world that don't have access to a toilet. Basic sanitation, right, that we use on a daily basis that a large majority of the population doesn't even have access to. It matters because having access to a toilet is directly linked to diseases like cholera, typhoid, even linked to water contamination. And so what we realize is lots of people are trying to solve this problem. You got Bill Gates, you got a bunch of universities, but the problem with what they're doing is they're not incentivizing people to use a toilet. You can give someone soil, you can give someone water, you can give them ash, but what they actually care about is money. And that's why we thought, why don't we just pay people to use the toilet? And so what we've done over the past few months is we've taken $10,000 and we've been able to take it to build out a prototype of a device that's turned feces into charcoal and urine into ammonium sulfate. So you see on the left-hand side, there's actually somebody in the lab that we paid to do the experiment that we created for us, and that essentially turned urine into a product called ammonium sulfate, which we were able to sell. And for the person drawing, just make sure I look as buff as that guy, please. I want to, look like that. But specifically, once we did that, we then decided that we also needed to talk to families. We need to create a toilet shell. So we created our toilet shell with our own hands, with designing this by ourselves. We were able to get 41 families to agree to using our toilet in Nigeria, and we talked to all the logistics networks to actually make sure that they were okay with the prices that we were setting. So we used WhatsApp a lot. And eventually, we created this project that we're now going to be implementing with a community in Nigeria. That's the first thing I'm working on. The second thing is in regards to the retirement home space. So specifically in a retirement home, if you need to call for help, you got to wear a pendant, and you click a button to call for help. But I thought that didn't make sense. I thought, what if you could just take in, fall detection, heart rate information, blood pressure information, put it into a smartwatch, and then automatically be able to detect if someone, had any of these, and then automatically help them. And so we worked on that, and we also incorporated indoor location monitoring, so I know where you fall and at what time, so I can essentially be able to prevent these things from happening. Now, as you can obviously tell, not a fintech expert. And if you didn't take away anything from that, essentially, I like to work on a bunch of side projects and not really go to school. Okay, I like to work on this stuff, and I don't really go to class. But the reason why I'm here is because I'm here to he said, essentially represent the Gen Z population. For those that don't know, Gen Z is those aged 9 to 24, which is a pretty wide age range, and I'm 17, so 16 and a half, about right in the middle of that. And for those that didn't know, Gen Z consume about 40% of all the consumers in the US. Now, what's really interesting is when I first started this off, I wanted to talk to my friends. My friends are Gen Zers. They're people who are in this community, and so I decided to ask them what were their first interactions with banking like. And it was really interesting. They all said something very, very similar. They said their first interactions with banking all had to do because their parents, or with some sort of interaction or guidance that they had with their parents. Whether it was, opening up their own savings account, opening up a debit card, it all had to do with their parents, and I wanted to see if there was some sort of correlation between data and between my friend group, and I realized that there was. About 72% of Gen Zers in the UK had some sort of parental guidance when opening their savings account, and 60% of them stayed with the same bank because their parents were also with that bank, and I thought that was quite interesting. And so when I looked into a timeline that I was creating to see if I could understand, what do Gen Z bankers actually care about, I took a timeline from age, 9 to 24, 17 being in the middle. If we think about what those age 9 to 17 actually care about in terms of banking, it's not really much. It's what their parents care about, because their parents are the ones influencing the decisions. So when a lot of these big financial institutions or big banks are trying to implement solutions towards Gen Zers, for those 9 to 17, some of the best solutions are actually ones that integrate models with their parents, because that's what they care about. And what I was interested in was to see if what they cared about in banking changed from the ages of 17 to 24. And I realized that it actually does. The first thing that I realized is Gen Zers, if you ever want to try to implement any product towards them, you need to be digitally native. And the main reason why is because we spend so much time on our phones, right? 60% of all Gen Zers already have some sort of peer-to-peer, wallet, some sort of peer-to-peer platform that they already use. That's why things like Cash App and Venmo were so popular to kids our age. On top of that, I also found that 47% of us would switch to banks that are completely digitally native. Banks such as Tangerine, they're really popular amongst kids our age. The last piece was that we're also adopting banking technology on our phones a lot faster than even the millennial generation. We're outpacing them. And the most interesting statistic that I even brought up earlier when I was sitting here was that we spend 10.6 hours online consuming content. That's about 40% of our day. So I've been here since 9. This conference ends at 5. 4 of those hours, I should have been on TikTok. I wasn't, but according to statistics, I should have been on TikTok. Now, that's the first piece, is us being digitally native. The second piece, if you want to impact Gen Zers, is regarding actually caring about social good. It's really interesting that, since people like Greta Thunberg have existed, a lot of us seem to care more about doing good for the world. And so that's why when I researched, I actually realized that 70% of us would prefer to have some sort of payment system where when we're shopping with a business, part of that payment goes actually towards a social good or a social cause. I even found that for those in our generation, compared to any other generation, millennials, boomers, we were actually the generation that cared most about ethics when it came to banking. The core values of the bank itself were actually some of the main factors that we looked at when we determined this type of stuff. And so another interesting statistic to even look at when you're looking at this is when it came to the COVID-19 pandemic, we were the second highest charity donators, Gen Zers. We generally don't even make a lot of money, and still we were the second highest generation of donors, which is quite interesting. Essentially, we just care about doing good. So that's something to think about when you're implementing a solution towards us. The last piece is that we really care about rewards and we hate fees. So in other words, we're really, really frugal. Basically, when I looked at the statistics, I found that a lot of us don't like to have fees in our accounts. 71% of Gen Zers would actually share our data if we could get some sort of reward system, but also on top of that, we would open up accounts that didn't have to do with fees. We cared more about fees than UX and UI factors, and we were more likely to open up a bank account if that bank account had no overdraft fees, which is quite interesting. Now, the last statistic that I thought summed this up really well was, since we're really frugal, according to Business Insider, I want to look at our shopping habits, and I realized that we actually think a lot about price. When you think about kids my age, you tend to think, we're the kids who spend $100,000 on a pair of sneakers, just randomly. But interestingly enough, that's actually not our generation. Most of our generation is actually more towards the side of being frugal, actually caring about rewards, actually saving our money. And so to kind of sum all this up, if you were to take away 3 main things from this talk, if you're in banking and trying to impact Generation Z, the first thing I would say is be online, be digitally native, because we know that that's where we spend a lot of our time. The second is that we all like to help, and so if the organization that you're working with has something to do with helping a population of people, then that's something that we care about. And the last piece is that, we're cheap, okay? We're literally like, brown people shopping. Like whenever my mom goes shopping, she's always looking for the coupon codes. Gen Zers, we're all, all about shopping. And so that's the 3 main points that I would take away if you were looking into banking and looking to target the Gen Z community. If you want to reach out to learn more about, where I got my statistics and also how I chose the friend group that I chose for the study set that you saw above, you can reach out to me. That's my email and my phone number. Thank you.
Thank you.